Do you enjoy driving in the peace of the night? That won't stay the same after you are done watching these true horrifying driving mishaps. Viewer discretion is advised. Watching these true disturbing scary stories might result in you never driving again out of terror. When I was 18, I was residing in Uvalde, a town that sprawled across rural Texas. Living in a low-income area, I pursued education at a local community college, since that was what my folks could afford for me. A close friend, Andrew, had moved to San Antonio, and I'd frequently visit his apartment just outside the city. One weekend, Andrew asked me to crash at his place. So I took my old and worn-out 1995 Toyota pickup truck, which was more of a liability than a reliable vehicle. The gas gauge didn't function, so I had to keep track of my fuel manually. The drive from Uvalde to San Antonio along Route 90 was uneventful, as I reached Andrew's place in good time. We would have a good weekend as usual, right? The plan was to hang out, grab some drinks, and have a relaxed evening, but things took a turn. His girlfriend, who was supposed to arrive the next day, turned up early. As tensions flared between them and the atmosphere grew awkward, I felt it was time to head back home. Setting off very late at night, Route 90 was deserted. Then, disaster struck. I realized I forgot to fill up my truck, and suddenly, the engine sputtered and died, stranded on the deserted road with a dead cell phone and a truck out of fuel. I turned on my hazard lights and hoped for a good Samaritan to pass by. However, multiple cars ignored my signals. With little hope, I resigned to sleep in the car until morning. What's the worst that could happen? Just as I was about to settle in for the night, a vehicle pulled up behind me without headlights. Confused and cautious, I checked to find no one in the vehicle. The situation felt eerie, and things took a terrifying turn when a stranger tapped on my window. I leaped. I looked down into the car and saw a man smiling at me. "Hey buddy, need a hand?" he asked. I lowered the window slightly and said, "Hey, I ran out of gas." "That's quite a predicament," the man said. "Step out and lend me a hand with this right away." When he said this, I honestly assumed he meant help him with a gas jug to fill up my tank or something. So I exited the truck and closed the door, expecting him to lead me to his truck. But he stood there, still smiling, looking down at me and saying, "I need you to empty your pockets." Was he robbing me? It took me a moment to understand what he meant. I was a broke college student, and I wasn't about to be robbed of my only cash and phone. I took off running in the direction of the trees and seemed to lose him. Then I knelt behind a large tree to catch my breath. When I heard him getting closer, I held my breath. "I'll kill you, you piece of," he said out loud. I'm not sure if he was just yelling in anger, but I was too scared to move. I didn't move even after I heard his footsteps fade away. In fact, I stayed in this position for the rest of the night, eventually sleeping behind this massive tree until dawn. At dawn, when I returned to my truck, the stranger and his vehicle were gone. The truck's doors were left open, and I discovered missing items and signs of ransacking inside. Finally, a passing individual gave me a lift to the nearest gas station, where I refueled and made it safely back home. What would have happened to me if I didn't run away? At 18, I admit I was reckless on the road, often succumbing to impatience and making rash decisions. Nonetheless, driving remained a significant part of my life, especially during the breaks from school, which was located a 5-hour drive away from home. I preferred traveling at night to avoid heavy traffic. This instance occurred during the beginning of winter break after the fall semester. My Mazda 3 was my reliable, albeit roughly handled vehicle. What was peculiar was my habit of frequently running it down to an almost empty tank. I'd often joke with passengers about the car's ability to keep going despite the fuel gauge hitting E. However, should I have not done this that day? Approximately an hour into my drive on the interstate, the car began making strange noises and jarring movements. It dawned on me that I might have truly emptied the tank. In a desperate attempt to find a gas station without the aid of a map, I took the first exit ramp, only to find myself in an unfamiliar, poorly lit, wooded area. The situation went from bad to worse as the car came to a halt. To worsen my predicament, I discovered that my cell phone had no reception. Hopelessly, I tried dialing 911 to no avail, quickly realizing that I was stranded without the means to call for help. What do I do now? Underneath the desolate night sky, I switched on my hazard lights, sitting alone in the darkness, praying for someone to come to my aid. After what felt like an eternity. A set of headlights pierced through the gloom. In a rush of hope, I signaled the passing car, which performed a U-turn and stopped behind me. There was an overpowering sense of vulnerability and fear as I faced the man who emerged from the vehicle, desperate for help. I explained my situation, and the man offered to drive me to the nearest gas station. Though apprehensive, I had no other viable options and cautiously accepted his offer, but not before ensuring my car was securely locked. Was this a good decision? As the drive proceeded, an odd odor emanated from his black Honda, accompanying the mysterious thumping and banging sounds from the car's trunk. I began to hear bumping and thumping from the back of the vehicle. At first, I assumed it was just road bumps or a loose object in the trunk. Finally, we arrived in a town-like setting. The first intersection had a red light. We came to a halt, and for the first time, there was silence. Then I heard thumps and bangs, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone screaming in the trunk. I looked at the man, who was looking at me. I unbuckled my seatbelt, opened the door, and ran in a split second while he tried to grab me and pull me back into the car. I heard him exit as well, but instead of pursuing me, he ran to close his passenger side door, then floored it down the street, leaving me to seek refuge in a nearby diner, immediately calling 911. The terrifying event spurred an extensive police response, aiming to track down the man and his vehicle. I was eventually escorted back to my car and assisted by AAA to refuel. This traumatic experience remains etched in my memory as the most harrowing incident I've ever encountered. I still wonder, who was that person trapped in his car, and were they ever saved? We're saving the best for the last. Don't forget to hit subscribe before we move on to the final harrowing story. Living in Morganton, North Carolina, within the serene expanse of Burke County, usually brings its share of quirks. But on a typical night shift, the unexpected unfolded into a series of unsettling events that still haunt me. As I embarked on my journey home around 3 a.m., weary from work, I stopped at a nearby gas station to fill my tank and grab a quick meal. A peculiar stranger lurked within the station, observing me with an intensity that set my nerves on edge, until he departed without a purchase. As I navigated the dark, winding roads, I encountered an unforeseen issue. The gas gauge plummeted abruptly to E, accompanied by the strong scent of gasoline. Struggling to comprehend the situation, I sought advice from my husband, who sensed potential tampering with the fuel line. Fearing the worst, I retreated, pulling over and escaping to the nearest residence. Had the strange man at the gas station tampered with my car? The eerie house I approached was shrouded in darkness, a dimly lit invitation emanating from within. After a frantic series of bell rings, an elderly man emerged, reluctantly allowing me inside. Seeking refuge and a phone charger, I witnessed a disconcerting sight in the reflection of a mirror. When he went to the kitchen to get me some water, I noticed him filling a cup with water. Then I swear I saw him drop something into the water. He walked away from the mirror, but the faucet remained open. He let it run for another 30 seconds before turning it off. Should I stay and charge my phone, or trust my instincts and leave? Realizing that the water had been compromised, I made a swift exit, fleeing to the roadside where, at the brink of my phone's demise, my husband's familiar truck appeared. Overwhelmed, I disclosed the night's traumas to him, leading to a flood of emotions. Inspecting my car later, signs of a break-in and vandalism were apparent. My back window was shattered, signaling an unwelcome intrusion. In the aftermath, the realization of being targeted twice in one night by suspicious men gripped me with a lingering sense of dread and still gives me shivers when I think about it. The next time you go on a late-night drive, make sure to check your fuel tank, or you might just end up like one of these unfortunate souls. If you're still craving for some late-night horrors, click here to watch more scary events unfold.